Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. If you are listening to this episode when it goes live, which is the middle of May, I have a question for you. Is your child having a particularly hard time right now? Maybe more meltdowns at home, maybe some tummy aches or trouble sleeping. Maybe they're not wanting to go to school. Maybe your teachers reported that they're having some issues in the classroom or on the playground, and you're wondering, what the heck is going on here? It may be that they are having some anxiety about the end of the school year. A lot of parents think that back to school, the beginning of the school year, is the most anxiety-producing time of year for kids. But in my experience working with parents, it's actually the end of the year. The end of the year, the end of the school year, anxiety is worse. And I have some theories about this. I think that the fear of the unknown, what is going to happen this summer, what is it going to be like next year? Kids get pretty comfortable with their known day-to-day routine. Monday through Friday, get up, go to school, who's in your class, who your teacher's going to be, and maybe they don't know what their day camp is going to be like, or they're not sure yet what their summer plans are. That can be really anxiety producing. So the fear of the unknown about the summer or the following year, combined with what I see a lot of well-meaning teachers doing, which is trying to prepare kids for the next school year, can actually make anxiety really high right now. So this is especially common in those years where there are transitions. So from kindergarten to first grade, or from elementary school to middle school, or middle school to high school, there's a lot of preparation. So lots of teachers, and I love all of you teachers out there, and I know that you're really trying to prepare your students for changes that might happen the next year. But there's a lot of emphasis, at least in my experience, on, in first grade, you're not going to be able to do this, or in middle school, this is going to be different and it's going to be harder, or in high school, they won't be holding your hand so much, or whatever. And those things are all true, but they can make some kids a bit anxious. How hard is this going to be? How bad is this going to be? So if you're getting calls from the school, or you're wondering what the heck is going on with your kid, here are some things that you can do. So first of all, just recognize that this is anxiety, right? So recognize that this fear of the unknown and the preparation that either we're giving them at home or teachers are giving them could be making them feel a little bit anxious. So anxiety is the brain and body's response to a perceived threat or overwhelm. And when our bodies or brains experience, our nervous system or our amygdala experience that overwhelm or fear, we have the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And typically we think of anxiety as the flight or the freeze, right? You won't go in the elevator, your kid won't go in the park if there's a dog there. But anxiety, or that fear response of overwhelm, that fight, flight, or freeze, is not just the flight or the freeze. It's also the fight. So it might be a meltdown. It might be acting out. It might be biting and hitting, depending on how old they are. So we just want to first of all recognize that this is anxiety. Next, we want to empathize with our child. So we might say something like, changes are a little hard, aren't they? It's so exciting that you're going to be having a new teacher and maybe some new friends at the same time. It's really hard not to know what it's going to be like. I understand. I felt like that sometimes when I was your age. And maybe they don't even recognize that it's anxiety. So you might ask, if they aren't recognizing that it's anxiety, you might say, I wonder if you're feeling a little bit worried about next year. And I wonder if maybe the tummy aches you've been having are because you're feeling a little bit worried about next year. And I want to point out here that tummy aches that are caused by anxiety are actually very real physical pain. They're not in their head, right? Even though they're caused by a psychological response of that fear, it actually is because our bodies are making all of these stress hormones that can make our stomachs hurt or feel upset. So tummy aches from anxiety are real. Kids are not making them up. So we might say, I wonder if you're feeling a little nervous about next year. It's hard to make changes sometimes, isn't it? So we want to acknowledge that our child is experiencing this, or just do a little investigating and really empathize with them. And they might feel better just knowing that we understand. That sometimes goes a really, really long way. And also, once we open the door to those worries, it might open the floodgates on their tears. They might, recognize that this is what's happening for them, or maybe they didn't recognize it before and now they do, or maybe they were afraid to say anything, and they might just need to cry. And we'll talk about that more in a second. The next thing you want to do after you empathize and open that door to conversation and listen is you really want to normalize their fears. Lynn Lyons, the author of Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, who is my go-to and mentor for all things anxiety, she says the most important phrase in her practice is, of course. So we really want to normalize that fear. Of course you're feeling nervous about next year. Everyone gets nervous about a new teacher or a new school. So of course are two really powerful words, because sometimes we can feel anxious about feeling anxious, right? Or worried about feeling worried. And we might feel we're the only one who feels that way. And that makes us feel alone and makes us feel even more anxious. So of course, it's a little bit stressful to think about what next year is going to be like. Or of course, you're a little bit nervous wondering who your teacher is going to be. This is all very, very normal. And the most helpful thing you can do for your child is to really teach them that it's normal to feel nervous about new things. And use that phrase, of course. Of course you're feeling nervous about next year. Of course you're wondering about who's going to be in your class. Or of course you're wondering what day camp is going to be like, etc. Next, we really want to let them know that they can handle it. We don't know either what next year is going to be like, but we want them to know that we're going to be there to support them through anything that might arise. We want to remember that anxiety loves certainty. This is another thing I learned from Lynn. And that we need to help our anxious children be comfortable with the unknown. So we might be tempted as parents to find out everything possible that we can about next year and who's going to be in their class and who their teacher's going to be and all of the things. But really, for them to be less anxious going forward in the future, it's really healthy for them to experience some of this unknown and to make sure that there are things in their life. And this is good even if you're not experiencing this end of the school year anxiety, but your kid might be, a little bit anxious in general. We don't want to have too much certainty in their lives. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because if people are anxious about the future, of course you want to comfort them and reassure them. But the thing is, the more we do comforting and reassuring and accounting for every possible thing that might happen, the more their anxious brain is going to want that and be accustomed to it and demand that. So to have that flexibility of being okay with not knowing everything that's going to happen, we need to encourage that, and we need to let them know that, we don't know who's going to be your teacher next year, who's going to be in your class. And yeah, first grade is different than kindergarten. You know what? You're a person who can do hard things. I know you'll be able to handle whatever happens, and I'll be right there to support you however I can. So it's that combination of being okay with the unknown or encouraging them to, at least be comfortable with being uncomfortable is part of that. And then also to back that up with whatever happens, you can handle it. You can do hard things, and maybe remind them it is a little bit hard to go into a new classroom. And remember, when you started kindergarten, you didn't know anyone either. And now you have all of these friends. So let them know that they can handle it, and that even if things are unknown, that that they're still going to be okay. So we're going to empathize with our child who might be feeling a little bit nervous about next year or about the summer, about the unknown. We're going to normalize that. We're going to normalize, of course you feel that way. And then we're going to be okay with the unknown. We're going to say, yeah, we don't know what's happening. It's a little tough when we don't know, but you know what? Then we're going to let them know they can handle it. You know what? You are a person who can do hard things, and I am right behind you, and I will be there to support you. Whatever happens, we'll figure this out together. And if your child's still having a hard time, make sure that they're laughing and crying. I mentioned that I was going to come back to crying. If they're still having a hard time, it may be that they have some big feelings in their emotional backpack that they've been carrying around with them, and that's part of what's making them have a hard time, right? I mentioned that they may be having more meltdowns or acting out more or not wanting to go to school. It may be just because all of these fears and tensions that they maybe haven't been aware of or haven't been sharing with you have built up in their emotional backpack, which is a metaphor for their bodies, where we hold on to all of our tensions and stresses and big feelings. If we haven't been able to process them in the moment, they can build up and cause us to feel really uncomfortable. 2 really great ways to empty that emotional backpack are laughter and tears. So if your child's still having a hard time, then make sure they're laughing and crying. Put it on your to-do list to do 10 minutes of laughter every morning, 10 minutes of laughter every day after school. Anytime they're upset about anything, really lean into those feelings, hurt knee, not having their, favorite snack after school or whatever it is. Really empathize and provide an opportunity. I'm not going to make them upset on purpose, but we're going to provide an opportunity for those tears to come. That'll be really great for their emotional health and for shedding some of that anxiety and tension that's been building up in their bodies. If your child is anxious most of the year or about lots of other things, you might check out Lynn's book. Lynn Lyons and Reed Wilson wrote a wonderful book called Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents. I used this strategy, the worry brain strategy, when my daughter was having some sleep anxiety about 4 or 5 years ago, and I wrote a blog post about it. So you can also check that out. We will link to those in the show notes, or you can just look up my name, Sarah Rosensweet, and sleep anxiety. You will find that post. So if your child is having a hard time throughout the year or in other situations and struggling with some anxiety, the great news is that there's so much that you can do as a parent to help them. 100% recommend the book Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, and a great place to start is with my Worry Brain article, which you can find in the show notes or on my website. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that the school year ends on a less anxious note for y'all, and that you find that these strategies really help your child who might be having a hard time about that sort of unexpected end of the school year anxiety. We always think of it as such a great time, right? The beginning of summer, but it can be hard for a lot of kids. As always, it would be so wonderful if you could share this podcast with some friends, share it on social media, and also if you could rate and review the podcast. We love 5-star ratings, and we love your written descriptions on either Apple iTunes podcast or on Spotify. We would so appreciate that. If we can reach more families, we can really, make a difference in the world. And the more people that know about peaceful parenting, the better, in my opinion. So thank you so much for listening. And I also hope to see you in our free Facebook group, Peaceful Parenting with Sarah Rosensweet. It is a really wonderful little corner of the internet. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.